Okay, let's call the budget meeting to order. Oh, yeah, sorry, Jim, whenever you're ready. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the budget meeting to order. Today is, what is today? Tuesday, May 18th. Oh, boy. Tuesday, May 18th. We are starting our meeting tonight at 6:47. We have a full school committee, as well as our superintendent, Dr. Josh Fidala, our assistant superintendent, Dr. Chris Lord, and our business manager, Joe Scanlon. And this is day 2 of reviewing our budget. Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you. I know you've done some work here and wanted to give some updates. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Could you please start with a moment of silence? And Mr. Hockman and I were talking earlier, and just makes you think tomorrow would have been Kara Mertag's birthday. So maybe if we could keep, again, her and her family in your thoughts while we take a moment of silence. And please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, and now I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Vidala, for an update. I know you and your team have been working a great deal on the budget, so turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So last week we went over the first version of the working budget. The total cost to the district came in at $80,653,444. So what we did is we reviewed that budget. We talked a little bit about how we got there and what some of the questions that the committee had. I went back and met with the team, and I provided everyone with a budget memo tonight. Talk a little bit about how we got to last year's number and what was incorporated in there, and then how we got to this year's number and what the next steps are. I think this is kind of a good place to just take a look at how we got to these numbers and what they mean moving forward, and then what the next steps for this working budget document is. So if you look at the left-hand column, this is how we got to last year. So from Dr. Kerbel's budget presentation last year, in FY21, we had identified, when we were building the budget, 3 budget targets. And the first one was level service, which means that all the pay increases, cost of living raises, inflation, all of those go in order to provide the exact same service from FY20 to 21. And that target was about $81 million. And then we looked at what would happen if we just level funded the budget, which was $77.3 million. And then we worked with the city, and the city took the custodians onto the city side. So level funded without custodians was $74.8 million. And the amount that was approved for the final budget back in June was $74,854,358. And the way that we got there, just as a recap, we moved 30 positions to the grants. We moved 36 positions over to the city side, which was custodians and the facilities. We had 12.5 retirements. We had 0.6 position reduced, so people who were going from full-time to part-time, and we eliminated 10.9 positions. So overall, from FY20 to 21, there were 90 positions that were not in the appropriated budget. If we look at our funding sources, so about midway down the page, Chapter 70 accounted for $22.1 million. The minimum municipal contribution was $50.1 million, and the city provided an additional $2.5 million in order to get us to the approved budget in June of $74.8. One of the big things that we did is we had the ESSER 1 funds, which was the funds that we got from the government, and we took our 24 part-time kindergarten paras, 11 teacher fellows, 8 library tutors. We added a technology staff member to facilitate the one-to-one devices, and we added some technology supplies materials and then some professional development materials around returning to school. So the 74.8, in addition to that, we got the $819,000 from ESSER 1, So the total cost of the district was $75.6 million. So the total was $75,673,603. That was the actual cost to run the district this year. So that's kind of a recap of last year. Does anybody have any questions on that? I just wanted to try. So that's kind of how we got there, which is a good recap. So today and last week we're coming in at, if we look to the top right-hand column, we're coming in at $80.6 million. So the level service budget, this would be if we were level service, including steps and lanes, maintaining the staffing levels, maintaining the ordinary budgets, updating our health care costs to make sure that they are in line, and updating the out-of-district tuitions. If you remember last week, we talked about how we had identified some grant funding from FY19 and 20 that we had left over, and we paid about $600,000 into the out-of-district costs up front. This year, that has to go back into the budget. So if we don't include ESSER 1, we're at $78.795 million to level service the budget. So last week we talked about the increases. We're going to get another allocation called ESSER 2, which is really meant to address the learning loss and the mental health needs of our students as we return to school next year and have a full reopening. So in order to do that, we've proposed 2 additional high school special ed teachers, 2 positions at the Higgins, 3 elementary special ed teachers, 3 school adjustment counselors that would be spread out to service K to 12, 3 school psychologists as well, servicing pre-K through 12 for the school psychologists. We're adding the bilingual educational stability liaison as a 1.0 FTE, and we're looking to hire a bilingual person to fill that role. We would like to hire 2 additional ELL teachers, and then all those positions from ESSER 1 we would put into the budget this year as well, plus our technology supplies and materials that we need in order to return, is an additional $1.8 million to the $78.795. So that's how we got to the $80.6 million. So that number on the cover of your working budget 1.0 is $80,653,444. That's how we got to that number. So level service plus all those positions and all the additions that we talked about last week adds up to 80.6. We believe this is the amount of money we need to run the district. So as we look at our funding sources, last week we got an update from the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and so we're looking at $23.1 million in Chapter 70 fund that will go to the city. The city's municipal contribution is 50.9. And then, so you'll notice that last year we were at 2.546 from the city, and this year they're able to give us 2.575, so a little bit more in the additional municipal contribution, which comes up to the 76.6. So the amount of money that we need to put in the appropriated budget next year that we'll ask for a vote on is $76,604,358. And so that leaves us with about a $4 million deficit, and I'll couch that by saying we're getting significant federal funding, which funding from ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 will allocate that $4,049,087 to get to the costs, the actual cost to run the district. So this is kind of a recap of how we got to the number and how we intend to pay for the number. So, I just wanted to sort of provide an overview with why we came to this number, what the city's going to allocate, what we're going to allocate for grant funding, and have that discussion. So before we get into the details of the actual budget workbook, I just want to provide this overview and answer any questions about how we got to these numbers. So I'll open it up to the committee if there's questions on this memo. It's a lot of information on one page.
So, Dr. Vidala, the ESSER money for the ESSER 1, that $819,000, all those positions are in this budget,
Correct.
as well as the proposed additional hirings totaling and supplies and materials, the 1.858. That's all in this current budget too.
Everything is in this budget. Everything that we need to run the district is in this budget, and we've identified the funding source from what we'll appropriate at 70.6 and the additional funding that we have from the grant to be able to pay for this whole thing. And so, last year when we ran the budget numbers, we just came up with the 74.8, and we didn't really talk about the additional money from from ESSER. And what I wanted to do is put it all in the grant so you can see everything, because a lot of what we've talked about valuing this year around addressing learning loss, addressing mental health needs, I wanted to put it in the budget so you could see it and then describe how we're going to pay for it. So in the next iteration of the budget, we'll keep the names in the detail so that they're allocated there, but we'll back out the salaries and say it's grant funded, so that we'll show the budget in a real transparent way that everything is here, and then we'll move those things into the grant. And so the allocation from the city will be 76.6, if that makes sense.
So on the city side, and I know it's all just one Peabody budget, but on the city side, the federal funding is coming through, we call it ARPA money, American Relief, I can't think of what the P stands for, Act. But anyway, we haven't received any of that money yet. We're told that it's there, it's coming, you know, there's certain criteria we can use it for, and that's still a work in progress as to how that's going to go for us. But that's going to dictate a lot of our budget. But I think if you can just kind of go over, ESSER 1 was received some time ago.
Right. ESSER 1 was received last year, effective to be spent on July 1st, and we have that money until September 30th. So we've allocated that money. If there's any money in that at the end of the year, if we didn't spend it down, we have the summer and we could increase our summer programming with ESSER 1. So that money was allocated July 1st, and we have until September 30th to spend it. ESSER 2 will be available for us on July 1st, and we'll have 2 fiscal years to spend ESSER 2. And ESSER 3, they're going to announce at the end of the month, and we'll have until FY24. So that'll be an additional, so it's a long-term, they're giving us the money up front, and we spend it down over time, and we'll allocate it in multiple year budgets.
Mr. Olympio?
Yeah, through the chair. So is it specific to each year? Do we have to spend, like, is there minimum spend in for each year, or is it just in the aggregate as long as?
So it's in the aggregate, and districts you can use a portion of ESSER 2 and a portion of ESSER 3, which is sort of what they're recommending. You could spend down all of ESSER 2 first and then tap into ESSER 3. They're multi-year grants, which is unique for us. Typically, we have one fiscal year. It has happened, I think, you know, a few years ago, there was some money, you know, during the first Obama administration, there was some money that came to the city that was a multi-year type grant, and the Race to the Top money was similar to that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Amico?
Through the chair, thank you, Dr. Vidal, for putting this together, and thank you, Mayor, for stepping up again, along with the City Council, with the additional funding that you've provided us with. Dr. Vidal, I have a couple of questions. The 2 Higgins positions, will those be teaching positions, administrative positions?
Yes, so those are both Unit A positions. Okay. So all of these positions, with the exception of the bilingual stability liaison, it's a contract position, it's a non-union position. All of the other positions listed here before at the ESSER 1 line are all Unit A positions.
Great, thank you.
Yep, so one of them was the reading position, another one is you know, a position, you know, again, both to address learning loss and exploratories.
And again, through the chair to Dr. Vidal, I see you have 3 adjustment counselors, 3 psychologists. Thank you. That goes in line with our mission statement over the last few years, where we're trying to help kids and find kids where they are and help them, especially over the last year with COVID, with mental health needs and so forth. And obviously, with your Unit A positions here, these are instructional positions, and we definitely had a lot of lost instruction over the last 16 months or so, so thank you for that. Other than that, it looks pretty good. I'll yield at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Any other questions for Dr. Vidal at this time? Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dr. Vidal, thank you again, and Mr. Scanlon and the entire team for putting the budget together. Difficult year for people, you know, just to function. I mean, last year, this time, you know, we were barely functioning. I mean, there were no kids in school, there were no people in buildings, so it was difficult to really ask for things that we typically get, but understandably last year we didn't. Is it your expectation that we're gonna wind up with that, 8, 10-inch binder that we typically get?
Yes, so our goal would be to have this discussion, keep all the names in this budget, back out, and next Tuesday, have a subcommittee meeting before the committee of the whole, before the regular meeting, have a committee of the whole, and present that big book to everyone, and be able to look at it, tease through it, and then if we need to have a final meeting, hopefully by then, once it's at the city's number, everything is there, we answer all the questions, we'll be able to schedule the meeting to vote on the budget and have a public budget hearing. But we anticipate next Tuesday having that binder ready.
Thank you, Dr. Vidal, and, I was really asking, it wasn't by way of criticism, and I hope it wasn't taken that way. It was just something that I think is helpful to me and maybe other committee members, just to see, it's one thing to look at a historical perspective, which was what we got last week. It's another thing to see some other stuff. Just by way of comment, well, actually, let me ask a question first. I see that and Mr. Olympio asked a question about ESSER. It looks like we're expecting to tap into a little over $4 million of ESSER 2 and 3 money for the FY22 budget. Do you have an understanding as to what will be available to the district under ESSER 2 and 3?
So ESSER 2 will be about $3.353 million, and we're expecting about twice that for ESSER 3. So it's a multi-year, so, if we're looking to spend about, we were thinking of spending a third, and a third. Now we think we're gonna spend probably about 40% in year 1, which is the most important, the most critical year. As we welcome kids back, we wanna make sure that we're fully staffed. We don't anticipate significant leaps from year 1 to year 2, but we really feel like this is necessary so we can really, wrap our arms around the kids and provide as much support as we can. But this is less than half of what we'll be getting over a 3-year period.
And thank you for that, and just so I'm clear, is ESSER 1 counted in that 3-year period, or is that something that was just a 1-year thing, and then we have 3 additional years?
So ESSER 1, we can spend until September 30th of this year. So once we close out the year, if there were any positions or anything that we didn't hire, if there's money left over, we can spend that on summer program, we can spend that on professional development or technology supplies to spend that out. So we wouldn't put any positions in that because it's gonna expire in September, but we could put something in there, curriculum materials or something to prepay, and make sure that we're getting there. And a lot of that would be some of the equipment and things that we're getting. So we do have any leftover ESSER 1 money we have until September 30th. And then these are good for the next 3 fiscal years, ESSERs 2 and 3.
So the roughly 10.3 or 10.4 million that we're gonna get from ESSER 2 and 3, we have the ability to spend as we choose for fiscal years 22, 3, and 4.
That's correct.
Okay. So, and thank you again for that information. And we as a committee and as a community have talked quite a bit about impacts of COVID and our students in particular, and I'm happy to see school adjustment counselors and school psychologists and some of these other teaching positions. The best money we spend is putting people in front of students. Teachers are valuable and they make a difference, so I'm happy to see some of that. Some of the things I'd like to see, and we'll talk about as we move forward, are some of the Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports that I think that we're gonna realize that we need. Teachers are going to need so that we can bring students back up to grade level as quickly as we can over the next year or two. And I think that those positions are also valuable, and they may be somewhere in here that I don't see. I see you shaking your head rather vigorously, so I suspect that. But in the right column, the middle of the right column, under your FY22 proposed budget, the increases to address holistic student needs. There are other increases in this budget that aren't contained within this paragraph or this block. I know that we had talked last week when we received the budget about adding some assistant principals and some buildings, and I think that there's going to be a conversation about how we're calculating or counting students and whether they're K to 5 or pre-K to 5, and, you know, what the contractual obligations are, particularly with a few other administrative positions that you're seeking to have put into the budget. We have Dr. Lord moving over to the Peabody, I don't want to call it prep because it's not.
Personalized remote education
The
program.
remote education program, and we have a new assistant superintendent who is coming on board at a pretty significant jump. And then we also have some other positions that weren't in the FY21 budget, like a kindergarten coordinator, that from what I'm reading, and again, thank you for the communication, it's been terrific, that position is looking to oversee the pre-K and kindergarten, and at the same time, we're counting the pre-K kids towards population within a building to add another administrator and an assistant principal. So, you know, if that's what's going on, and I don't know that, that's how I'm reading it, and I don't know that that's the correct way to read it, but if that's how I'm reading it, I'd rather see some of that money spent on some of these specialists and some supports for students rather than administrators. And I know that there's a need to add some administration within this school district, and we've been a little perhaps remiss in years past at keeping up with the regulations that need to be adhered to and all the work that takes place by you and your team. But those are just some of my preliminary thoughts on what I'm seeing so far, and just so we don't have to go back and forth, and you're going to respond to all of this, it looks like. But you mentioned something a few minutes ago about maybe when we get the book, we'll see the positions that are going to be funded by the ESSER grant, but not the salary. So if I could ask, I'd like to see the salary, just because I think it's public money, whether it's coming from the federal government or the state government or the city government. And I think that that's important in a budget document to see the salary. It can be, you know, footnoted, you know, somehow, or designated that it's coming out of a particular grant or what that is. But I think it's important to have full transparency. And I'm not suggesting that you weren't.
Right,
that was
absolutely. I mean,
motivation, yeah.
that's why we started here.
Yeah.
As opposed to starting as opposed to starting with it all backed out, we start with it all in so everyone can see it. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Huck. Any other questions, Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you, through the chair, Dr. Vidala. Thank you for all of this information. I have a couple of questions regarding in the athletics line items, that there doesn't look like there's any funding for game staff, maintenance custodial, police details, or the overtime transportation, which would be level funding from this year, but I'm suspecting that we're going to have a normal year next year. Do you know?
Yes. So if you recall, last year, a number of items were moved into the revolving account. And so as we collect money for user fees and gate receipts and things like that, it goes into the revolving account. And so things like game officials, police details are paid out of the revolving account. And so we reviewed that this year, and the revolving account, after putting all the things in it, and I know we had a conversation, people were a little bit worried about putting things into the revolving account, worrying that it was going to deplete it, it actually went up this year. So our overall balance increased in the athletics revolving account, and so we anticipate that we'll have more participants next year, we'll have more expenditures as well, but we can cover all of that within the revolving account and not put a dent in it. So a lot of those things, you know, the expenses that you have are paid by the income that or the revenue that you bring in.
Okay, so they're there, they're just not listed as these line items are.
Right,
They're
right.
available. We're expecting a
right.
normal.
We're expecting, you know,
Yeah.
hopefully, you know, we'll see the same success that we saw this year on the athletic fields, but we're expecting, you know, the same number of home games and, you know, really returning to, you know, a fully funded athletic program next year.
Great. One of the things that I get concerned about, a lot of times during the budget, we talk about level funding, kind of keeping things the way they are, and I think we all know that this year was completely different. One of my concerns is talking level funding from this year, eliminating staff or not replacing staff that possibly retired, that we're gonna be short, those type of things. So those are the things that I kind of will be looking for in this budget, where it looks level funded, but actually we're gonna be missing some staff, and I'm just wondering if you've seen those numbers. I'm concerned about teaching staff, not replacing retirements due to, I mean, some people may have left from COVID and kind of took,
So this year, we've replaced all of them.
okay.
I know last year, during the budget process, there were some reductions, and we may do this year. People who retired during the year were replaced. Their FTEs are still in the budget. We did add a couple positions over the summer, once we knew how many people were retiring, and it was like 3 people retired, we could end up hiring 4 positions because of the salary differential. All of those are included here, so we're not looking to reduce anyone. Anyone that retires, their position will be filled this year. So we're not looking to reduce any positions.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Any other questions at this time? Okay, Mr. Arnottis?
Sure, thank you. I'll be quick. No questions as of right now. I had a few last week, and thank you for answering those. I'm just going to compliment the focus on mental health so far in this. I think that's incredibly important. I know we talk about that pretty consistently here, and after this past year, I know that is going to be at the forefront when everyone is back next year and trying to recover from this past year. So, I think often people will say, where's my tax money going? And I think just looking at this, you're going to have an additional 3 adjustment counselors, psychologists, so many of the things that, people now understand are so necessary. And I think often, it's kind of put your money where your mouth is, and that's what's happening here. So I just wanted to identify that. I look forward to the books next week. But so far, I'm feeling positive about this. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnottis. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank Dr. Vidal. I want to thank Mr. Scanlon and everyone that prepared this. This was really helpful. This one page is really very good. My question is, this summer, I mean, I know, I see in the budget we have the summer school, the special ed summer school. This is different. Are we doing a summer school program this year for our students? Is it in this budget? Is it a carryover from the ESSER money in the last budget? If you could direct me to where it is, that'd be great.
Sure. So most of the summer extension is from this year's school budget, the
Okay.
FY21 budget. And we have a number of things that actually on the next school committee agenda, we'll be talking about the high school summer program. We're going to do 2 sessions of credit recovery, just to make sure we can get kids back on track. And then we have our EL programs. We're doing a middle school program for the first time, as well as an elementary program. And then we have our special ed program, which is going to be pre-K through post-grad. And we have an additional reading program for kids at the Carroll School. And so that's going to be open district-wide. We're just going to house it at the Carroll School because of the size and the location being sort of central to everyone. So we have a pretty robust summer program that we're excited about and really hitting a lot of different areas. But that'll be paid out of funding that we have already allocated.
Already, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. In terms of scheduling, we had some preliminary discussions with the city clerk's office, the city council. We're targeting June 15th and June 17th. For one would be a city side presentation, the other would be a school side presentation. I don't know yet which would be which, but we're looking to try to focus in on those 2 dates. Council Pete McGinn is the finance chair. We've been trying to work with scheduling with him and Allison Danforth, the city clerk. To accomplish that, I'm hoping that we could vote to move forward by the end of next week to meet those timeframes, just for planning purposes. Mrs. Dunn?
Question. As far as that schedule, are you looking for, completion on our end by next week, and then we would set the date for our public hearing on our side of the budget?
Ideally, yes. So ideally, we would vote next week, set up our public hearing for the following week, maybe that next Tuesday, 2 weeks from today. June 1st, and then that would give us time to get it to the council for them to receive and mark it up for hearing. That's just preliminary right now, but that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of potential schedule.
Okay, so given that timeline, what our team is planning to do is bring to the committee next week, next Tuesday, a week from tonight, a full budget book with the city's number of $76.6 million, as well as the names and then an indication of grant funded next to all the names and line items that will be grant funded. We'll do a separate side budget, like an ESSER 2 budget, basically. That'll be a separate document that we'll end up entering into the system when we submit it. But I think that would be helpful, for the committee to see where these people are going to. So you'll see them reflected in the working budget without their salaries, and then we'll have a separate budget of people who will be paid out of the ESSER money moving forward, or items that will be paid out of the ESSER money. So for example, we talked about Math in Focus is a really comprehensive math curriculum that we adopted this year. Next year, we're looking at, a significant amount of money, $170,000 it services 2,800 kids, or 3,200 kids. So we'll be looking at putting that money into ESSER. So things like that will come out, and we'll just allocate how much will be there. So what we'll start with is that 1.8 that you see listed here, and then I'm definitely open to suggestions from the committee, but what we'll be identifying is things like the new positions, the administrative positions that Mr. Hockman referenced, the curriculum materials, any positions in here will allocate money for their health insurance as well, so that'll come off of the health insurance in the appropriated budget, and people who are grant funded, their health insurance will be paid for out of the grant as well. And so that's a requirement of how our grant funds work. So we'll work on that, but I really wanted to show everyone here, because this is really what it costs to run the district, and then be able to show the two side by side, and together this is our budget.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you, through the chair, Dr. Vidala. Thank you. Did you say that you were prepared to give us the full budget book by next meeting?
Tuesday, yes, that's our plan.
Is it possible, and if it's not, just let me know, for us to get it before the meeting so that we have time to go through it, or would it not be available?
We'll do everything we can to get it to
I
you.
realize it's
Yep.
a lot, I do.
Yeah. So one of the challenges is that we did have multiple people working on this budget. So we did this to get the budget consistent. The backup documentation, half was done, by two different people, and so we're working together to do that. And so, we kind of discussed on how we got there. So we want to make sure that everything is lined up and the formatting is the same. So that's being done this week. It's just about done. Once that is completed and the detail looks the same across all 8, I just wanted the formatting to be perfect for everyone when you see it, and not some ordinary looks different than other ordinary, or some salary detail looks different than some salary detail. So everything will be consistent. We've been able to put our heads together on that. That'll be done this week, and then we just have to back out the $4 million, and then, hopefully by late Monday, early Tuesday, we'll have that, and then we'll get those out. I could probably send it in a giant PDF to look through, and then we can get the budget book that you can flip through. I know some people like the pages, so we'll do our best to print out those pages and put the binders together for everyone.
Thank you.
All set? Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, thank you. If we get the PDF, we may have to include bifocal lenses for a budget line for committee members. No, yeah, I'm already there. I'll need trifocals, I guess. But no, seriously speaking, and respectfully, Mr. Mayor, if we're getting the hard book next Tuesday, and we're going to need to digest some of that material, and you're hoping that we have a budget passed on June 1 from here. We're receiving the budget book. I know we've received the budget on the 25th, with Memorial Day weekend in between. I would just And I know you're asking for action by the 15th or 7th, or the 1st, so that we can have this completed at the city council level by the 15th or 17th. Perhaps maybe the 22nd and 24th might be a little more feasible. I just don't want to come in here next week and we're going to need to digest and schedule meetings and go through some stuff once we get the materials. And then just lastly for me, at least for tonight, I'm not, you know, I'll put it out there. This is really our through the chair to Dr. Vidal, this is really our first budget working together, even though you did a lot of work in the current year's budget. I'm not a big fan of funding salaries with grants. I know we're in a situation this year where we're taking on, or hoping to take on, some important positions to help kids and faculty and staff, you know, kind of bridge a gap that's just developed through the nature of the way the last, you know, 15 months have gone or 14 months have gone. And I don't know what your expectations are with these proposed increases in terms of school adjustment counselors and psychologists, and I don't know where we stand as a district in terms of attrition, you know, 3 years from now. You know, I don't know what that looks like, and those might be some conversations that we are worth having next week or some other time.
Absolutely, and those are conversations that the mayor and I have had. You know, we are projecting out 3 years from now. This money is designed for this. So I wholeheartedly agree with, you know, you don't get a grant for a year and put a bunch of salaries into it. However, this money is to address the needs of kids as they return, and I don't know how you spend $3 million without hiring some people. I mean, I could spend it, but, you know, this is, and you said it earlier, the best way to impact kids is to put someone in front of them. And so the people really matter, and we saw that this year with our teachers and our adjustment counselors and all of our staff, that the people matter. And typically you don't want to put salaries in grants. However, these grants are designed for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Any other questions? So, absolutely, in terms of scheduling, that would make sense to me. This was just kind of a sample of how we could go about doing it if we were going to look at that 15th and 17th, but we may need that additional time. So certainly the following week would work as well, and just depending on how things go. Tomorrow I can reach out to the city clerk and look at that week as well to try to plan ahead for a little extra time on our end to do some school budget work. So I think either was can work, just depending on our next steps. Okay. So next Tuesday, we have a regular meeting at 7. So how about we put it at 6? And do you think we should maybe schedule another one next week, Wednesday or Thursday, just to maybe plan ahead, or just want to keep the Tuesday for now? Keep Tuesday for now? Okay. So Tuesday, May 25th, 6 p.m.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, we do have to post. So if we decide on Tuesday we want another meeting next week, the only day available is Friday. I guess we have to post for 48 hours. So I would ask.
So should I post?
I would ask that you post Wednesday and Thursday. I don't think we want to meet Friday of Memorial Day weekend. We don't have to have the meeting, but if we post it, we can have the meeting.
We okay with that? Just to have it, Mrs. Dunn?
I won't be available that Thursday. I already know that in advance, but Wednesday is okay, I'll be there.
All right, so what I'll do is, how about we go 5:30 on Tuesday, the 25th? Just to give us a little extra time on that Tuesday. 5:30, go 5:30 to 7. 7 we'll have the regular meeting, and then I'll also book or ask Marge to post Wednesday at 5:30 and Thursday at 5:30 if we need them. Okay? Why don't we go with that schedule, and we'll see where it takes us. And then Dr. Vidal and I will work with Mike Gingras, Allison Danforth, the city clerk, and make sure we have a variety of potential dates for presenting to the city council. Okay? All right, thanks, everyone.
Motion to recess the budget hearing.
Further motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Arnottis. All in favor of that motion? Thank you.